Senator Natasha has escalated her ongoing battle with the Nigerian Senate and Senate President Godswill Akpabio to the international stage by bringing a suspension and allegation of sexual harassment before the Inter-Parliamentary Union. This bold move follows a fiery clash with Godswill Akpabio, the president of the Nigerian Senate, and has raised questions about the integrity of the Senate actions. Natasha's suspension from the Senate has sent shockwaves through the political landscape. Officially, the Senate claims that her suspension was due to gross misconduct. However, the timing of her suspension has raised eyebrows, particularly given the serious allegations she made against Akpabio. Natasha has accused him of sexual harassment, a charge that has reverberated through the halls of power, igniting a fierce debate about accountability and justice for women in politics. Her decision to escalate the matter to an international platform underscores the gravity of the allegation and her determination to seek justice. Natasha's supporters argue that her suspension is a direct retaliation for speaking out against a powerful figure, while critics of the Senate decision accuse her of using her position to deflect from her alleged misconduct. This is Viewpoint. I'm Olaitan Babatunde, and with me is Odiawa here. How are you doing, Odiawa?
I am perfectly fine.
How is everything going on with this Natasha's thing?
We're following the episode which has gone from the national stage to the global stage. So as events unfold, we'll know what happens during the discussion.
All right. Join us shortly. You're welcome back to the show. And like I said earlier, we're talking about Natasha Akpoti and Akpabio today, underneath and outside of the political war and all that. There's been some jabs going on here and there. There was a post where I saw that Natasha was, loved off by her husband. She was, and then the same moment, or probably during that time too, Akpabio also posted the same thing, and people were like, probably they're competing about one thing or the other that we're not seeing aside the political landscape. But then I would like to know, how does this recent 6-month suspension of Senator Natasha reflect the relationship between legislative authority and judicial ruling in Nigeria?
Well, when we talk about the legislative branch and the judicial arm, these are both arms of government which are concentrated with the law in question. The legislative arm actually makes the law. The judiciary actually interprets the law for proper understanding. Now, in this case here, I was zeroing in on what the laws made by the legislature actually states, and the judiciary now interpreting these laws. Okay. Talking about the recent suspension for 6 months. The Constitution, the laws within the Senate actually states that an erring member of the floor, the Senate or the House of Reps, should be suspended for 14 days.
Okay.
But if we look at it, that's under Order 67 of the National Assembly Rules and Regulations. But if we look at it, Senate presidents, House of Rep members have used it as a tool to checkmate, or I would say whip floor members into line, in the sense that it now looks as if it's a personal issue meted out on that particular individual. Because if you look at it, historically speaking, we have Oviomo Agege, who has been a victim of this suspension. We have Ningi, who has also been another victim. We have Milai Edino, who has also been another victim, and now Natasha, who has actually been a particular victim. And if we look at this series of episodes, one thing is key. It's the opposition that's always whipped into line. Why? Because they are not compliant with the policies of the majority or the ruling party, which is taking the whole fair share of the Senate. So the judiciary on its own part now comes in to counter the Senate, stating that they should actually stick to laid down established rules, which is the Constitution, which specifies that an erring member should actually be suspended or disciplined for 14 days. Yes, okay. But oftentimes, to get back at a particular member for personal reasons best known to them, they extend it to probably 3 months, just as it was done to Ningi, and of course 6 months now, which is even worse now. And I want to say it was quite extreme for Natasha, because why? That is where a whole gender violence now become pronounced. Gender violence doesn't mean you raise your hands on a woman. You could be denying that lady resources to actually make sure that she has to advance in life. That's also gender violence. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to spill blood.
All right. Also, I think you also agree to the fact that the judgment melted on Natasha is on the high side. It does, okay. And okay, I would like to note something now. Natasha is being punished, but there's been talks about what Akpabio did to her. Why is the Senate not doing anything? Because I feel, why is the president not saying anything? Because I feel for her to have gone to the high PU, definitely it is because the judgment she was expecting, what she was expecting them to do,
wasn't fair enough.
Well, yeah, wasn't fair enough. So why do you think the president is silent on this issue?
Well, there's no how. The president on his own part is attending to crucial matters, no doubt about that.
This is also crucial.
This is also crucial,
yeah.
also, but it is also, I think it's big enough. It's not too big for the Senate to handle.
Okay.
Why? Because, for instance, there have also been preceding offenses which have been taken care of, even without the involvement of the president. I made mention of 3 House of Rep members and senators who were also suspended. They did need the intervention of the chief executive, the president.
Okay, can I cut you short there? Now, in Nigerian constitution, if we're going to look at it, we have the president as the #1 citizen, we have the vice president as the #2, then the Senate president as the #3, which means he's the chairman in the Senate. So who do you think is in the right position to call him to order if it is not the president?
That is why we have committees set up. We have the Committee of Ethics and Public Relations. Now, this particular committee was set up to address the situation only for Natasha to flaunt the other invite for her to address the situation. So that was where there were issues. So she has not just shot herself in the foot alone. That was why she was accused in the IPU, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, that she was actually charged for gross misconduct. Because that was not the only flaunting or thrashing out or ignoring the invite to address the situation was not the only misdemeanor on the part of Natasha.
Okay. All right. So I think I will agree with you that she did a little bit of bad thing there. So considering the court ruling that have previously nullified similar suspension, what implication could Senator Natasha's case have for future legislative action and the rule of law in Nigeria?
Well, for future legislation, futuristically speaking, it depends on how this issue is addressed.
Yeah.
From the legal angle, whereby it states that an erring member should be actually suspended for 14 days, not exceeding 90 days, or probably even 6 months max, as is being served to Natasha.
So, yeah.
Also, there's a crucial issue of how a woman is treated in governance. That's another question, because if you look at it continentally speaking now, Nigeria actually has built itself out from that orientation where women are not adequately represented in parliament. Yeah. Because if you look at the ratio among African countries practicing democracy, Nigeria, I say, has tried. Other countries, the ratio is not something which you would say is quite welcoming.
Yeah.
So how this issue is addressed, or the outcome of this issue upon being addressed, will actually dictate the tune of future legislative matters, not only for male erring members, particularly for female erring members also.
All right, so I'd like to know, in what ways might the Senate's continued use of suspension as a disciplinary tool impact the principle of representation mandated by the Nigerian Constitution?
Suspension is not, I would say suspension is not bad.
Okay.
After
all,
6
months is bad.
6 months is bad.
Exactly.
14 days, fine. It's fine. It's okay for you to sit up. Probably maybe you're denied your allowances, your privileges, your security detail is withdrawn from you. All those things. I think it's enough for you to sit up and, stick to what is actually on ground. You go to your schools, erring students are punished. It's either you're flogged, depending on the case, you are suspended for a particular number of weeks or months, and depending on the case, you're also expelled or rusticated. So I think the punishments, which is meant to be meted out on erring members, should actually be different depending on the gravity of the offense. You don't just say you're throwing out a suspension just like that, because future senators or future House of Rep members will be like, oh, is it not suspension? What is there? After all, we can do some plea bargain at the end of the day. Once you serve the person's suspension, then some plea bargain is around the corner again, back and forth. Everyone will begin to misbehave in the process, and there will be no sense of sanity or rule of law being in place. And everyone will begin to look at the House of Reps or National Assembly at large as a circus.
All right. But in your own opinion, don't you think this 6-month suspension for Natasha is more like a way of undermining the power of women in the society? Because I feel that the 6 months is outrageous.
Yeah, I will key into that, and I would say yes, in my own opinion, because we should actually speak out. Yes, there was no harm in what she did in speaking out. If she had actually gone there and stated that she was suspended beyond the stipulated days for suspension, that would have been a palpable argument or defense for her to put up. But we are still waiting for the evidence of the sexual harassment.
But how do one get evidence of sexual harassment?
Like I said in the previous episode, sexual harassment could come in various forms. Yeah. So it could be stalking on, now we have social media, it could be stalking on social media. So many people have use their photo editing softwares or apps and do all sorts of obscenities for people's images. That's also another form of...
what if it was physical?
If it was physical, that is why I will continue to hit on provision of evidence, because you cannot deny what was actually, or what has actually been brought before everyone.
Okay, so what I'm talking about physical is probably it is only when he sees her that he talked about it. Probably he didn't mention it on any social media platform where she could, just use that as evidence. Probably it was during, after each meetings they had. Probably that was when he said all those things and she didn't record any of the conversation. In that case, where do you expect someone like that to get an evidence? Probably that is why she's really not coming. I'm not ruling out the fact that she might be lying, but then I'm just trying to say that might be the reason why she's not coming up with evidence.
Well, I disagree with that, because for an exposed senator of her caliber, I think she should have more... Her IQ should be, her intelligence quotient should be more high enough to know that if at all in the future you're going to accuse this fellow of such,
you should have gotten
evidence, because you cannot tell me with someone of your own pedigree. Your mom is from Ukraine, your dad is a Nigerian from Kogi, was a politician. You went to the top schools, so you cannot tell me you have a deficient intelligence enough not to know that in case something like this comes up, you should have evidence to back up what you have to say. That's why I began by saying that if she actually went to the IPU stating that the suspension I was served, apart from the sexual harassment, was beyond the stipulated number of days, I think she would have been on the good side of winning the case. But now, that's on the side. The Senate has also, of course, the Nigerian Senate, being a body under Nigeria, is under the IPU. It cannot stand to lose its stake under the IPU as a parliamentarian member of that union. All right.
But you know that people give all the snide comments. They don't necessarily have to come out to you and, they just, all this subtle remarks that that this is what they mean. But then to them, they can actually say that that's not what I mean, even if there is evidence. That might be the case. But yeah, I think I also agree with you that with a level of intelligence, she should have done something in regards to that. But then in what ways can global democratic institutions such as the Inter-Parliamentary Union play a role in addressing allegations of misconduct within national legislature, particularly in cases involving gender-based violence and political retaliation?
Well, political retaliation, if we look at it, we could also sense some undertone of political retaliation. Remember I mentioned the case of where Akpabio was in the PDP, and Akpoti, still in the PDP, is now probably might be worked up over the fact that he decamped the APC. So these are variable factors or options which one should weigh into. Now, coming to the IPU, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, of course, the body was set up in 1889 to, of course, address the needs of parliamentarians across various parliaments across the globe who are actually practicing democracy. Now, Nigeria happens to be one, and it cannot afford to stain its white in that particular body. If not, it might also be served some sanctions also. So there is need for even to address these questions. Now, to even address it, particularly when it comes to gender-based violence, I believe that legislation should actually be set up or put in place to make sure that checks and balances are put in place to checkmate all sorts of forms of obscenities like this, now which has come to sexual harassment, or even you want to serve a suspension, or maybe this fellow has been kicked out of the Senate. Why? Because of gross misconduct, or impeached, or out of office. legislation should actually be put in place. And peradventure there are legislations. They should make sure that these legislations are reinforced. It's not going to be a child's play from the surface.
Yeah.
So that when it's being read out to even some of the parliamentarians, because some of the parliamentarians, frankly speaking, if they knew or were well aware of some of these laws, you won't be serving 6 months suspension or even 3 months suspension, because it's a conflicting notion with what the judiciary has to interpret. Now, coming back to the IPU now, on its own part, I mentioned reinforcement. Apart from reinforcement now, there is need to actually make sure that you actually take a stand and make sure that these laws are strictly adhered to. Now, upon being adhered to, you should also update these laws, because oftentimes these legislations or laws might be obsolete, such that they are no longer conforming with today's way of life or lifestyle. And as such, they should therefore be updated to make sure that they suit the purpose in today's evolving political arena. I give you a typical example. Before the suffragette movement, it was only men who were actually voting or allowed to contest for office. Right. Now, a vote had to be passed to make sure that it includes women after all the movements which had become rampant, particularly in the UK and the US. Now, where was this vote actually passed? It was passed in Parliament. Now, it was the Parliament actually supported that women actually come in to vote. So that is what I mean by updating the legislations which are in place. There was a legislation in place meaning that only men could vote. Yeah. But now, it now had to do with equality, bringing in women. So updating the legislations in place and reinforcing the legislations should actually be a solution to all that.
All right, so let's talk about the implication of Senator Natasha's claim regarding the safety and security while advocating for justice outside of her home country, because literally she traveled outside the country, you know, to still call Akpabio out. And how does this highlight the risk faced by women in politics globally?
Women in politics globally, it's a case of when you speak up, you're being shut up one way or the other, either through the pen and paper or the bullets or resources are being taken away from you. One way or the other, you're being shut up, so you don't speak up. The point I'm trying to make is, let's take a cue from Malala, who there was an assassination attempt on her in the Middle East. That is a typical example of political assassination, because there's no other way you call this one concerning security. Okay. Because there's no how she will be in New York and she won't be with her security detail. Probably because this, fine, she might have the suspicion that Akpabio, being a high-ranking profile politician, I mean, there can be insinuations or assumptions that, okay, her life might be threatened with the kind of suspension she was being served. And now for her to gather the guts to go to the international community. And if you look at it, it's a case of course, with the history of Nigerian politics, they silence you one way or the other. So maybe she has come to terms with the fact that she can not only be silenced in Nigeria in today's world, she can also be silenced over there, because let's tell ourselves the truth. Most of our politicians are highly placed and highly connected, not just nationally or continentally, but globally. So I am just saying, just as we see in Hollywood, you could see mercenaries can abduct her, then we see some headline tomorrow on Arise or wherever and say, Natasha has been abducted. I'm not saying she's been abducted, but these are the security concerns we need to be bothered about, which I want to believe are assumptions from Natasha.
All right. Now, how might the response from Nigerian Senate to the Inter-Parliamentary Union impact public trust in the institution, especially regarding allegation of misconduct and sexual harassment?
Nigeria, first of all, has to defend its image. It's like someone who accused you of stealing. You come out and probably you were not there. Yeah. Or you were not the one, maybe you were there, but you didn't even know an item was being stolen. Probably the item was stolen before you got there. And upon getting there, you're a prime suspect. Now, Nigeria on its own part owes itself to secure its image, to prevent it from being dented in the international community. We belong to so many international organizations. Of course, in the past, Nigeria's image has been dented before on several notes.
We are known as one of the corrupted countries.
One of the corrupt countries. So it's going to be an uphill task to redeem your image. I'm not saying that even the superpowers are not corrupt.
Yeah.
Corruption is an English word. It's everywhere. So it's now, the onus is now on Nigeria to actually come out to defend itself. Of course, kudos to Senate leader Opeyemi, who actually, through Honorable Kafilat, went to the IPU to defend the image of not just Nigeria, but also the Nigerian Senate before the parliamentary body, that these were the reasons why she was suspended. So if peradventure there were sexual harassment issues, she should actually come out with an evidence. If there's no evidence, then she doesn't have a case.
All right, more like that should be settled out of whatever is happening in the Senate regarding our gross misconduct and all that.
Yes.
All right. Now, what are the potential consequences for Senator Akpabio and the Nigerian Senate if a thorough investigation into the allegation against him is conducted and reveals conflicting evidence?
It will be really amusing if thorough investigation is conducted and he is found guilty as accused and charged.
Yeah.
But just as typically, if you are accused or found wanting, after thorough investigation has actually been conducted, the only right thing for you to do as a political office holder is to resign, step down. The only person who has done that, and I really congratulate her, was leader of the House of Reps or Senate back then, Patricia Ete. She actually stepped down when she was accused of financial misconduct.
Okay.
I can't remember how the story went down. But what a political office holder should actually do is to step down from office, just as we see in the international community.
Yeah.
But here in Africa, not just Nigeria alone, I don't think they are going to step down. Particularly with the fact that a vote of confidence has actually been passed on him. Yeah. So I don't think he's going to even step down anytime soon. And talking about whether the evidence is going to show up, there might be some parley if actually an evidence is actually true, provided where Akpabio is found wanting. But until then, we keep our fingers crossed. All
right. And I just want to add to that, like you said, in other countries, people would resign. But in Nigeria, we are more about still upholding that position regardless of the dented image. But I really hope, as much as I do not wish this is true, but in case something like this should happen, I can only hope that Senator Akpabio would resign in order to at least let the people know that there are consequences for every action. Yeah. So lastly, before I let you go, in light of the criticism from Akpabio regarding the handling of internal Senate matters, what mechanism could be put in place to ensure that disputes within legislative bodies are resolved transparently and effectively before escalating to international forums like, Natasha moving to the IPU to discuss this issue?
Well, that's where the Committee on Ethics actually comes in. Because frankly speaking, in democracy, there's need to always employ dialogue. You don't apply every form of force all the time. It's just like when Tinubu got into power and he wanted to begin to wage war on Niger. It wasn't the right tactics at all until his advisors had to come in. Democracy embraces dialogue and not conflict. So for future purpose, in my own opinion, things like this, even on the part of Natasha, she shouldn't have been quick to be spontaneous, to react by jumping from media house to media house and eventually going over to the global stage, IPU, and flaunting the invite of the committee. Peradventure, she must have been dissatisfied that even the people on the committee would not even look transparently into the matter. That was why she had to bypass them and go over to do whatever she had to do on an impatient note. Secondly, even when these instruments are in place, such as the Committee of Ethics and Relations, there should be a time frame for discussions to take place. Why? Because fine, there are other matters to be attended to, but there should be a time frame for these things to actually be looked into. When these time frames have also elapsed, there should also be another stage, because even when a law is being passed by the same legislature, there are phases in which it will pass before it's assented to. So I think due process should be followed.
All right, thank you. Eyes of the nation are now fixed on the IPU as they prepare to delve into the complexities of this scandal. Will Natasha's bold stand lead to a reckoning for the Nigerian Senate, or will it further entrench the culture of silence that has plagued women in politics for far too long? That will be all on today's episode on Viewpoint. And I'm Olaiton Babatunde, and I've been your host, and with me has been Odiawa here. I thank you for joining me on the show.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Follow us on all our social media platforms at Veegil Media, and you can also subscribe to this channel for more political insight. Thank you for watching.